members of the press, good morning, citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, and supporters, well-wishers joining us in Trinidad and Tobago, in the Caribbean region, North America, Europe, and elsewhere. And welcome to our Sunday morning press conference being held at the headquarters of the United National Congress in Chaguanas, Trinidad. This morning it is our intention, as we do every Sunday, to bring certain issues to the fore involving governance, involving serious matters of mismanagement by the government of the day, and to raise the current affairs issues that are troubling citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. We would like to begin by indicating that, as we are aware as citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, all is not well. There are several challenges that we face in the national community today. In the last few days, if one reflects, we have had another horrific week of crime, of murder, of mayhem. Just a couple of days ago, I believe, a bullet-ridden body of a father had to be in front of a child, a 2-year-old child, I believe, in Lachus Road, Pinal, where a father sacrificed his life in a most gruesome killing to protect a 2-year-old child. When we reflect again, we have had situations of murder, not one citizen, but 2 and 3 per day. This is happening for the last few years in particular, but it has been intensified now. And while this murder and mayhem is taking place, the Prime Minister himself was loitering in Guyana between 2 meetings. One meeting, I believe it was a CARICOM meeting, and the other was an energy meeting. And between that time, indeed, there was a week in which the Prime Minister chose to stay in Guyana to undertake certain touristic visits, while the country was in this mess that we find ourselves in. The Prime Minister was on a vacation in Guyana. This is a Prime Minister who expects a monthly salary soon of $80,000. While he is doing that, the Minister of Energy, who is in this case a shadow to the Prime Minister almost, this Minister of Energy is on a globe-trotting trip around the world, was last spotted, I believe, somewhere in Northern Africa, attending to some meeting which we are not sure that Trinidad and Tobago would ever see returns on in terms of investments and so on. Another minister have been in Europe, attending meetings in Europe, in Brussels and so on, and they are traveling the whole world and ramping up air miles and so on. They are burning the budget for travel. In several ministries, they are burning up their budget for travel, while the country receives little or no benefit from that type of waste of money. We also have seen in the last few days communities throughout Trinidad protesting over such an issue as water, where communities are without water. Even in my own constituency, there are areas that have been without water for weeks. We have had protests over roads. The country has been in a state where many businesses are now curtailing their activities, even some closing because of rampant crime, insecurity, the cost to doing business. And of course, a major issue that rears its head is the issue of extortion. And we have already pronounced on this and called for the establishment of a particular unit in the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service to deal with extortion by gang members who do this now with monotonous frequency and have threatened the lives, the liberty of business persons and their families if they don't pay this type of extortion tax. We have had a situation where our young people are without hope. Many young people today with university degrees, higher level education, and so on, find it hard to get a job. So much so that the OJT program and the National Employment Service of the Ministry of Labor have had to expand their reach to sop up some level of employment, because the business sector, the industry, the productive sector are not employing young people anymore because the economy itself has collapsed. so that there is no job creation. And this affects particularly our young people at all levels, whether they are in hotspot communities or they are in communities where they are higher income. Those young people are today without jobs, they are without hope, and they are without a clue as to what future they have under this current regime. In terms of the crime, I wanted to remind persons we have had a kidnapping for ransom in my own constituency a week or so ago, in which a relative of a businessman, a prominent businessman, was kidnapped. Thankfully, I think the person was tied, and a farmer found the person somewhere in a lonely, deserted, abandoned area, and the police came quickly to rescue the person. So these are some of the issues that we have faced. And while we are facing the issue of crime, and I'll come back to that in a few minutes, we have had this ongoing matter which constitutes a regional security issue and today an environmental disaster. As we all know, on February 7th or thereabout, we have had a situation where we had an oil spill off the coast in Tobago. And while that happened off the coast of Tobago, the government has remained clueless. The Minister of National Security, who at times can be seen sleepwalking, has become hopeless in terms of answering certain questions. We all know that this constitutes an act of environmental terrorism. It has affected not only Tobago, where we have seen the pictures and the images, but the oil spill has been going now to Grenada, to Bonaire, threatening Aruba. The Dutch, I believe the Dutch army and military personnel visited Bonaire and other places in the Dutch Caribbean to bring relief in that area. So it is a Caribbean-wide environmental disaster and an act of environmental terrorism. Today, brothers and sisters of the press, we had to depend on a newspaper today, I believe it's the Sunday Guardian, to see oil spill secrets, in which there is something of an expose, very lengthy indeed, which brings together two investigative arms of journalism, one the Guardian Media and one, I believe, Bellingcat from the European territory, I believe is the Netherlands. And they have produced a report today with some detail indicating the origin of the Gulfstream barge, the origin of the tug, I believe, Solo Creed, and related matters. And they are tracing a chain of activities that led to February 7th and the oil spill. Now, if the newspaper and investigative journalists can do this across the transatlantic ocean, if they can do this, what is the government doing? How come the government of Trinidad and Tobago, with all the multilateral support at their disposal, Mr. Hines runs the Ministry of National Security, where we have spent billions on intelligence and so on, and the government cannot respond today to tell us who are the owners of that vessel called the Gulfstream barge. They cannot tell us conclusively where did it originate from, where was it going, what was it doing. We read in the paper today that it is possible that that vessel was docked at a port linked to the Venezuelan oil petroleum company PDVSA, and they were moving with in and out with fuel, with bunker, I think bunker fuel, and moving in violation of United States sanctions. So Trinidad and Tobago is now in this rather fascinating position where our waters and maybe agencies have been used to facilitate sanction busting, where vessels and groups of business persons linked to one government or another are involved in sanction busting through Trinidad and Tobago waters, and has produced now an act of environmental terrorism, where the government is unable to say. Today, brothers and sisters, remember February 7th to today, in around the first week of March, they have not produced a single report as to the owners of this vessel, who are responsible, what steps are being taken to call those responsible to account, and certainly in the case of damages, to pay for the damages that we have incurred. And these damages, I want to repeat the point, they are long-term, because you are dealing with fisheries, you are dealing with livelihoods, you are dealing with jobs. You are dealing with the environment. There are long-term damage. And no one has been called to account. This government has not been able in 21 days or so to bring any conclusion in terms of investigation. And I must remind you that the Ministry of National Security, in a release, I believe, dated February 14th, I have the release in my hand, they speak here, this Ministry of National Security, of an ongoing investigation into this crisis. Today, brothers and sisters, March 3rd, I believe, today, we are no nearer to having questions answered on this matter than we were on February 7th. The government came to Parliament, we asked questions, of course, and the government told us that they simply don't know. They said they will be upfront with us, they know nothing. That was their answer then, and we suspect that is their answer today. And this is why we are depending at this time on reports in the press. Investigative journalists across the board, between Europe and Trinidad and Tobago, to tell us something that may be accurate, because we cannot verify this easily. It requires state and international agencies to verify ownership. We do know that, according to the newspaper, it involved owners operating in and out of Panama, possibly certain areas across the Atlantic as well, with interests in the Caribbean and particularly in Venezuela. So we have had this crisis, and today we call for a full criminal forensic investigation to trace the digital footprints of this environmental act of terrorism and sanction busting. We must have an account, an investigation that is multi-divisional, multi-agency, and cross-border to ensure that questions are answered. It is not enough to be told that 420 gallons of oil and water mix have been vacuumed from the ocean, much more to be dealt with. 420,000 gallons of oil water have been vacuumed so far. And this is a serious threat to tourism in the Caribbean, the lifeblood of the Caribbean economies generally. The lifeblood is tourism. And when certain islands are affected this way, there are long-term problems. There are long-term economic, social, and environmental problems to emerge, and the Trinidad and Tobago government has appeared clueless. In fact, many citizens will understand, to get basic information on this oil spill, we had to read United States newspapers, European journals to get answers. We couldn't read Trinidad and Tobago news because the government did not know what was happening. So that is the oil spill matter. Returning to the issue of crime, over the last couple of days, we have had several major issues that I wanted to touch. And incidentally, it is our information that a United States official will be visiting Trinidad and Tobago this week. I believe is the United States Deputy Assistant Secretary for Security Agreements, along with other officials from their foreign policy advisory team and so on, will be visiting Trinidad and Tobago in the coming days. And one wonders whether the Prime Minister will be here at all, because this is the Prime Minister. When he came back from a vacation from Guyana, he said he was coming back to Trinidad to go on an official vacation. And when he's coming back from that official vacation, I think he will return for an official medical. So we are not sure to see this Prime Minister around until about May, June, in that time of the year, in the holiday period. So, in fact, he may come back to Trinidad in the holiday period. So, officials of the United States are coming this week, and they are very concerned, we are told, with the issue of the TTPS and vetting TTPS officers who work and interface with the elite United States security agencies. There are critical issues to be raised. One wonders whether the head of national security himself will be here. Could I also indicate to you that in the newspapers today, there's this issue of the Border Protection Agency. I took note of it. I have been in touch with several persons. In fact, the political leader, the Honorable Kamla Prasad Bisesa, saw this, and we spoke at length on this matter and was very concerned, and I share the concern raised by Mrs. Prasad Bisesa and others as well, that the Joint Select Committee, of which I'm a member, I want to indicate, recommends Border Security Agency and so on to intervene now to deal with illegal firearms. And there's a reason why members of the United National Congress on that Joint Select Committee, while we do participate with vigor we do participate with the interest and passion required, we refuse at times, not all the time, we refuse to sign certain reports. And this report, I believe, has not been signed off by myself or the other member of the National Security JSC. Now, I'm saying this because while we are getting the reports in the press that the JSC recommends Border Security Agency, and I believe some criminologists and so on are chipping in to say that's a good idea, I remind this country in October 2015, weeks after the PNM formed a government in this country, I believe September 7th, weeks after Edmund Dillon is on record in the TTT news, I believe, in the newspaper, delivering a speech, and Edmund Dillon is saying that the government is committed to a border security agency that will interface and integrate all border control systems and law enforcement. This is October 2015. 9 years later, they have done nothing. Absolutely nothing has happened. But today, you hear of Border Security Agency and people jumping up, excited, jumping up and waving flag. Good idea, good idea. That was an idea from 2015, and we indicated that. We indicated that 9 years they have done nothing on that matter. What do you expect? If they couldn't do something in 9 years, what they will do something in 9 months? They can't. They are incapable and incompetent. So none of us on this side are excited about this creation of Border Security Agency, which was promised by Mr. Dillon in October 2015, and nothing has happened, and nothing will happen. While that is happening, 5 fishermen have gone missing, and off, I believe, Cedros. The Minister of National Security knows nothing, says nothing, and does nothing. And he's very consistent in that. He says nothing, he knows nothing, and he does nothing. He says, well, the Coast Guard looking. But the Coast Guard, it is reported in the newspapers, the Coast Guard told the family that their vessels are not working. And on that note, I believe the Trinidad and Tobago Coast Guard should appear before a Joint Select Committee on National Security now to account for their assets. How much are functional? How much are not functional? Because we believe that there are serious critical problems with the Coast Guard as it relates to maintenance of the existing vessels and having the human resources, the manpower, to actually manage those vessels and have them functioning at optimal capacity. This is a very serious issue because we are always being told you have 6 Damian vessel, you have Austral vessel, you have this vessel. In fact, the ordinary citizen is lost when you talk about how much vessel the Coast Guard have, but how much are actually functioning? We don't know. And when situations like this happen, we are told that the hunters must put $600 gas in a boat and go out in the sea to look for fishermen. The Coast Guard, so what the Coast Guard is doing? What are they really doing? And they must now account to the national community by way of a Joint Select Committee intervention. And a very bizarre matter developed in the last few days. I believe it was Thursday, the 29th of February, where there's a report in the newspaper, I believe in one of the newspapers, had a report that spoke to this issue of a graveyard of bones discovered at Sealots. Off Sealots, and it was reported on Saturday the 2nd, but it is the February 29th, a gruesome discovery was made after lawmen acting on information journey a quarter of a mile into the swamp which runs along the Gulf of Paria at a place called commonly Dog Island, which is located off Production Drive, Sealots. And having gone through marshland and horrible conditions and so on, the party of officers discovered a macabre scene of human bones across the mangrove. Now, this is something you watch in the American TV series called Bones, where you sometimes see in thriller movies, they discover a makeshift graveyard behind someone's house who killing people for 40 years or something like that. This is reality. When I saw this, I assumed it was fake. And then on inquiry from the police themselves, I understand there is some truth in it. And they have discovered bones across the mangrove. They found the remains of a body hanging from a tree. And if you don't have a good stomach or heart or you just had breakfast, I ask you to turn away from the camera now. Because I actually have in my possession this gruesome photograph, which some of you may not want to see, but I will show it for those who are interested. This really is a photograph of the body found hanging from a tree in the mangrove. This really looks like a scene from these American horror thrillers that we are accustomed to when we were growing up. This is Trinidad and Tobago, and we are told by the police that when they found the decomposing body, they had a gunshot in the head. It showed that the person was shot in the head, and some police intelligence are suggesting that they were actually shot in the head while they were hanging and still alive. This is gruesome. This is brutal. This is horrific. This is Trinidad and Tobago. Under Keith Rowley, Fitzgerald Hines, Teotiong, and others, that we would find this kind of horrible development, and a killing field located really, I think about 5 kilometers from Port of Spain city center, that this will be happening. And it speaks to several issues, the collapse completely of law enforcement. It speaks to the issue of what the criminal intent involved when people believe that they can do this and get away with it. So, members of the press, these are very, very serious matters engaging the attention of citizens. And I remind you, it was just about a month and a half ago, the Prime Minister came back to Trinidad, I believe, to change his clothes and leave again, made a speech and said we are giving $100 million to the Defense Force for an intervention in hotspots. What has happened to that? We said that we did not support that. That was taking money literally and throwing it to gangs. Where are you going to get retired Defense Force men and women to come back? Where are you going to get them to come back and go where? Which retired Defense Force officer going in a hotspot, going in a place where a body like this could be hanging, and they are going to deal with crime? This is unworkable, and they were using that money to throw away to the gangs, to give the gangs. But this morning we want to bring hope. We have outlined a comprehensive plan to deal with crime. Mrs. Prasad Bisesa has spoken, I believe now for about 8 years or more, on this issue of crime and policies. We have outlined enormous policy, whether it is stand your ground policy, dealing with extortion, dealing with home invasion, dealing with cybercrime. We have outlined those policies, and we are convinced that we, in the United National Congress, we will return law and order to Trinidad and Tobago, and we will do it in quick time. It will not require a long time. We have said before, in 6 months, we can at least make a dent. In 6 months, we can make a dent. We can deal with the criminal activity in 6 months, not reduce dramatically necessarily, but on 6 months, we should be able to confront this crisis. It is time to secure you. It is time to secure your family. The time is coming to remove the PNM, and we have to return law and order. There is no economic development without law and order, and we must be very clear on that issue. More will be said, I believe, on that in the coming days. But while this is happening, I want to indicate to the national community, while this is happening, the government is busy doing some very strange and suspicious things. And I will indicate one area at this time. They are involved now, the PNM and the political leader, they are involved in a political campaign. And this party is involved in a campaign using resources of the state. We are told that they are building a war chest for the general elections, and part of it is giving out hundreds of millions of dollars through 2 agencies in particular, many, but 2 I'd like to raise this morning. The Rural Development Company and the Palo Seco Agricultural Enterprises Limited Company. What is very curious is that we have new procurement laws in place, which they resisted for 9 years, I think. We have new laws in place. It requires state enterprise to put on their website their list of work for the year, what they intend to do for the year that requires procuring goods and services over a certain amount, over a certain threshold. I have in my hand a printout from the website of Palo Seco Agricultural Enterprises Limited. This is a printout from their own website. This speaks of everything that they are going to procure for this year, including auditor services, supply of computer equipment, delivery of office furniture, software systems, planning systems, infrastructure projects for and on behalf of the Ministry of Agriculture in various areas, and so on. You know, this speaks nothing to roads, to drainage. Absolutely nothing to roads and drainage. But the Palo Seco Agricultural Enterprises Limited is on the way to tendering for $300 million in roads and drainage, while this is not published on their website, in breach of the procurement laws. That is what they are up to. And we are told it is a select group of companies that are tendering and receiving awards across the board, not only Palo Seco, across the board. And those companies have links to the PNM and the Balize House project and funding the PNM in the next election. One or two from South Trinidad as well, which we know well. They are involved in siphoning monies through companies to the government, the PNM, to fund their election campaign. And we are calling for this investigation into the Palo Seco Agricultural Enterprise Limited that cannot indicate that they are building roads and drains, but are tendering for multi-million-dollar projects for roads and drains in contradiction of the law. The Rural Development Company, we believe that has gone rogue as well. They are giving out contracts left, right, and center without proper tendering, without proper supervising in some cases. In some cases where they undertake projects, we are told that is substandard work. We have called before for an investigation into the Rural Development Company. So between the Palo Seco and the Rural Development Company, they are moving with about $500 million or more in contradiction to the law, and they are siphoning it out to the ruling party of the day to fund their upcoming general elections campaign. And we'll have much more to say. We have indeed filed some questions in the Parliament and elsewhere to deal with this matter of the abuse and the theft of government funds using state enterprises to do so. I also wanted to raise one matter before I close this segment, and that had to do with another very serious matter that is in the national domain today. And I raised the matter, this matter. It is in the Express newspaper of today. I won't be gagged. And in a nutshell, without me reading the entire thing, is that a former high-level official of Neil and Massey Holdings, I believe it was, former high-level official of Massey Holdings, indicated that at some time ago that there were serious problems arising out of bad governance, arising out of waste of funds, very suspicious, almost macabre as well, developments where the person indicated that they were spending money to send people to train abroad to talk to the dead, in a nutshell. I haven't been engaged in that, but what I can say is that whatever that might be, that is not for a company that has a 40% shareholding of a government. The taxpayer funds 40 cents on the dollar of Massey through, I believe it is National Insurance Board, investment into Massey. So that when we look at Massey, unless I am mistaken, we are also looking at taxpayers' funding in some form or fashion. And we are told that this is a complete crisis now, where they have undertaken to have an engagement, an investigation, involving, incidentally, I believe, the first gentleman of the country, who is an attorney at law, investigating this matter. And they are investigating and has asked that the person who is the center of the controversy silence herself in terms of the conduct of the investigation. She has refused. But this private sector entity has questions to answer as to their use of funds, as to what kind of macabre and bizarre type of training they are involved in. This company, Massey, is involved in running supermarkets and so on in hotspots areas of Trinidad and Tobago, or in relative short distances from hotspots. In hotspots area, I think about 2 or 3 young boys are killed a day. So you have 3 souls transitioning a day. They send people abroad to talk to people who transition. So They should have been in touch with their local communities and contributing towards anti-crime initiative, contributing towards education and training, contributing towards development in the local communities rather than wasting millions and billions of dollars. And there were other stories related to this. I want to remind you, I believe it was the former CEO, if I'm not mistaken, who in an article, shareholders concerned about bonuses to Massey executives, dated February 18, 2024 as well, where they were concerned that the president and group chief executive officer had left the company and had received, I believe, a bonus of in excess of $100 million. In excess. And these are serious concerns as to what type of bonus executives could be receiving. Bearing in mind the state has some interest in this. The government has interest in this. The taxpayer has interest in this. At a time when people cannot get water, at a time when people cannot get a pothole fix. Imagine in this country now, humanitarian efforts are afoot to fix potholes. That's where we are. Humanitarian efforts are afoot to fix pothole. You are giving CEOs $100 million in excess as bonuses. And as I say, connected in some form or fashion to the state. While in those companies, some of them, they struggle to even pay the minimum wage to workers. They are downsizing, firing low-income workers. And this is the situation that we face, so that they are not investing in young people. They are not investing in the hotspot communities as required in terms of business, in terms of jobs, in terms of income transfer. But they are giving themselves huge bonuses. And they are sending people to be trained in speaking to the dead. That is a serious matter that we will keep on top of and continue to raise, because as we believe this concerns not just the private sector, but it concerns the management of state funds in one way or another. These are some of the issues we wanted to raise this morning to indicate that all is certainly not well. And in closing, I would say that you must understand that elections is in the air. You must understand that elections are in the air when the PNM continues this type of rampant waste, mismanagement, and squander to siphon money for their war chest. The PNM, recently I saw a couple nights ago another disturbing story, where if it is true, it is horrible, and the PNM as a party has really fallen now lower than the white line on the road, where a councillor, I believe, in the Malik area in Samuel Lavantil is accused of going onto church grounds, I believe it was, and threatening persons on the church grounds by saying, I didn't come here to talk, I come to shoot. They are claiming in the newspaper or social media posting, it is a councillor in the Samuel Lavantil Regional Corporation. If that is so, it is unacceptable. It is unacceptable that persons who are elected, it is unacceptable that they will threaten young people or threaten anyone in this manner. So those are some of the issues. Before I close, let me remind members of the media and the public that tomorrow night, Monday night, we take our anti-crime symposium to Sandy Grande, I believe it is, and Mrs. Prasad Bisesa, leader of the opposition, and other very prominent speakers will be there to deal with, continue to address the issue of crime, policies, and programs that we will be outlining through this very successful series of meetings called the Anti-Crime Symposia, organized by the Office of the Leader of the Opposition in Trinidad and Tobago. So I will leave it here and then invite some questions if there would be any.
Right, good morning, Dr. Moonilal, Akash Samaru, Guardian Media. You called for a full criminal forensic investigation into the oil spill matter. And can you tell us how that approach will be different to what government is doing now in terms of its own investigation?
What is government doing now?
Well, they said they are investigating it as well.
No, but what are they doing exactly? Do you know?
I'm not.
You don't. The point is,
sure, no.
the point is, you, Akash, you don't know, and I don't know. They said they're investigating, but the public, there's the point. The public don't know what they're doing because they are not reporting. They are not telling us every week or every 2 weeks, as the case may be, what are they doing. There has been absolutely no report to the national community here, or the stakeholders, if you want to say that, on what has been the outcome so far of their investigation. While we have in the newspaper today outcome of their investigations. Newspaper accounts are not official accounts, of course. But the government need to tell us first what they are doing and if they have arrived at any preliminary conclusions based upon the enormous resources at their disposal. As you will know, there are several units in the Ministry of National Security that coordinate with international agencies in the Caribbean, for example, CARICOM, in the United States and Europe, that they should be in a position to trace and say conclusively the owners of this vessel, the originating point of this vessel, where it was destined to, where is the owners, assuming it's a company with directors, where are they located at this time? A government can't do that because of their international liaison with law enforcement. A newspaper can't do that, really. A newspaper can publish a certain amount of information with a level of accuracy, but you need official information, and to our account, as we said, we know absolutely nothing of what the government is doing at this time.
How does a forensic investigation provide us with more transparency then?
What you can do, okay, if you want to go into a micro kind of discussion, if you are in government, something like this occur, okay, it occurs, you could prevent it, but it occurs. You establish in the ministry a small team that works with the international community quickly, in real time, day by day, hour by hour, to track and trace vessels, owners, persons, because the persons must be alive and living somewhere. Who are they? What are they? When did it happen exactly? What are they to account for? Damages, for example. And there are laws that you can look at on the environmental legislation, on the marine legislation and so on, for pollution, for recklessness, negligence, destruction of the environment, abandoning, just the fact of abandoning a barge in the sea may constitute some offenses as well. So you have to find people and companies to call to book, and a forensic investigation into that, led by a Ministry of National Security that is awake, a minister that is awake, with a multi-divisional team, very small team, 4 or 5 people, but working with the international agencies, the International Marine Organization, for example, CARICOM Impacts, for example, the United States has agencies that deals with this, Europe has agencies that deal with this. That can bring about, you would think a conclusion can come, preliminary conclusion on this matter can come in 7 days. We are now how much? 21, almost 25 days. And we have not even a preliminary conclusion from the government as to who caused this, what caused this, where are the people, have we made, if we are saying today, I'll call a name because it's in the press, somebody by the name of Austin Jackson or something is involved in this, he is a king in this business. Where's this man? Where is he located? Where's the immigration records that we can locate him? He's somewhere. He carries passport or passports as the case may be. Where is he? A government can get that information. How come you could trace everything in Miami for businessmen in Trinidad? You could go all over the world and find all type of information on people, but you cannot trace the owners, the crew members, in this case, of 2 vessels, one a tugboat and one a barge.
Is there anything the opposition can do with respect to the parliament to get answers from the government?
We did file a question on Friday. It was not approved as an urgent question. That question has been redrafted and filed on notice. So I believe in a couple of weeks we will get some answers on this matter. But as you know, in Parliament, when you ask oral and written questions, there's a certain time. Whereas urgent, you can ask in the morning and get an answer in the afternoon. We did file an urgent. I did file the urgent question. It was deemed not to be urgent. So we expect in the coming days that Minister Hines must, in a way, answer in Parliament.
With respect to the JSC report,
sure.
In compiling the JSC report, which recommended that the BPSA take over the security functions that are under the remit of the Customs and Excise, I was a member of that JSC that made that recommendation. Did you object it at the time? In compiling that report, I mean, these things takes, the discussion takes a long time. It takes a long time. Over the period, it would have been a year or so, at some time either myself or someone else in the JSC raised the issue that these matters were already in the public domain and already promised by government before.
I can't tell you the exact date and time, but one of the reasons why, when we read these things, we are not prone to signing or to excitedly, jumping up with a flag in our hand, is because we know this is something promised 9 years ago. So this is not new. And it is really an act of hypocrisy, I believe, to come to fool the population at the 11th hour before a general election that you put in a border security protection agency in place while you promised that 9 years ago.
I read the rationale for it. So therefore, if not the BPSA, what is your recommendation, therefore, for strengthening border security?
We are not objecting necessarily to a border security authority or agency. Now, that requires significant legislative change. That's the first point. Because remember, customs and all these law enforcement agencies are governed by law. So if you want to create agencies, authority, it requires significant legal drafting work, amendment to legislation, maybe even repealing legislation. That requires time to do it. That will not take a few months. That takes a little time to do it. And while in principle, one can look and one is not disagreeable to new institutional arrangements. For example, this has to be seen within the context of the wider distinction we make in national security. Mrs. Prasad Bisesa is on record as suggesting that national security be divided into different components, which is defense force and homeland security somewhat. And you have to work this new architecture in line with your wider institutional change. And that is a challenge. So in principle, there may be some element of positive advantage and so on over with the border security agency, because clearly we are not in a good place with the existing institutions. But having said that, this will not happen. It was promised 9 years ago. And what has happened here is that, for example, I remembered well now because I remember the tour of the customs and so on. One of the major problems is that they have no scanners, or one scanner working as the case may be, while they should have, let's say, 5. And when you ask what is taking so long to get a scanner for 3-4 years, we were told that every time they come close to obtaining a scanner procuring, the Ministry of Finance in particular changed the rules of procurement. So one day it was through Central Tenders Board. The next time it was through selective tendering. The next time it required somebody approval. When we asked the head of customs, why does it take 3 years to get a scanner? She said to us clearly, she said we would have gotten that in 6 months. But they kept changing the rules for procurement, and therefore we couldn't get it. Look, the mobile scanners in the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, they were purchased. They had a demonstration using mobile scanners. After a while, they said we couldn't use it because of training. Then we couldn't use it because we don't think it's effective enough and so on. The port scanners can be purchased. If you can purchase 6 boats in Australia by visiting Australia one day, and in a few months you get 6 boats, why you can't purchase 6 scanners for the port? So there's something more. There's something deeper there. When we were in office, we also had the challenge with customs, with immigration and so on. A simple thing like canine security in the airport. It requires procuring more dogs. But they can't do that either. I mean, they can't procure a dog. You think they procure a scanner? So there's a complete breakdown in terms of their political will and whether they will do anything in the coming months. In fact, as I said, their main objective now is to build a war chest for the general election.
My last question from me. Yesterday, the Progressive Empowerment Party pledged its support to the UNC and your leader. Have you all had discussions with them? And what will this partnership look like, if you can tell us?
Well, what I can say is that the political leader, Mrs. Prasad Bisesa, is on record last Monday, I believe it was, at a meeting in Caroni Central, I believe, is on record as calling upon all the political parties and generally the parties that are not in Parliament, which we commonly call here third parties, to unite around a common goal, common vision, common mission and principles, and to work together. I think that was a call that Mrs. Prasad Bisesa has been making for years now. Not only now, but I think she reinforced it on Monday last. That call, we are happy that Mr. Philip Alexander, who I believe was the founder, if not the current leader, of the People's Progressive Party, has responded to that call in a press conference, People's Progressive Empowerment. They have responded to the call and they have responded, the PEP, they have responded to the call and has indicated that they will throw their weight, so to speak, behind the UNC and Mrs. Prasad Bisesa. So it's something that we welcome. It is something that requires further discussions by not just...
But have there been any discussion so far?
I have not been involved in any discussions, I can say that. But we welcome that. We welcome that move. We believe that that is in the right direction to go, given the crisis the country faces. And Mr. Alexander and others, not just Mr. Alexander, and others who may wish, to join us. We will, in the coming days, we must have discussions, not only with the People's Empowerment Party, the PP, but with other organizations as well who are willing and able. So it's a positive development for the country. And in the coming days, I believe that, more political entities and so on with interest in the country, with interest in removing the PNM, may well join. So that is all we can say at this time. Anything else? Any other question? If there are no other questions, I will just repeat. I believe we have the to give the exact location of the anti-crime meeting. I believe it is in Sandy Grande, in Swaha College in Sandy Grande, tomorrow evening beginning at 6 p.m. That's very important, beginning at 6 p.m. the Swaha Hindu College at Sandy Grande, and we will be hearing from the Leader of the Opposition, the Honorable Kamla Prasad Bisesa, and others at that. Well, you hear it first on the press conference. I'm being told that the former Prime Minister of St. Lucia, Mr. Alan Chastanet, is in the jurisdiction, and the former Prime Minister of St. Lucia will be one of the other leading presenters at that meeting. So that is something that you want to attend. We, of course, encourage you to attend, to ask your questions, to raise your issues, to raise suggestions, and really bring to the fore the issues of crime, which the Prime Minister has duly ignored in all form or fashion in Trinidad and Tobago. So, members of the press, brothers and sisters, supporters all, I think we'll leave it at that for the moment. We look forward to your presence both at the physical location and on our various social media platforms tomorrow evening for our anti-crime symposium. Thank you and God bless.